Hi, Bill.
Good morning.
Hi, everybody. I don't have a lot of voice, but I got a little bit.
Good morning. Hope you're gonna feel better soon, if it's a cold or something else.
Nah, just chronic laryngitis.
Uh-oh.
Hey, Bill, can I ask a question? Maybe this is
Yeah.
a poly question. Um, the sunset for in the IGA is 20 years. Is that why our contribution is set at 20 years?
Um, I'm not even no, I would say no, that is not why your contribution is
Yeah,
set at 20 years, in my opinion.
and I
It's
was
for some
positing,
reason, I just think there was always the word was it was a 20-year commitment.
Well, okay.
So
I
I
mean,
don't know where that came from.
um, and I was thinking that might be because we thought we were gonna have sunset. I think that's why, and not that I think 20 years is totally appropriate. It just feels like it should be tied to the sunset, I guess, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe that's part of the discussion of the agreement.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know where the origins of that 20-year commitment came from. It just felt like it's always been a topic or
Yeah,
kind
a-
of.
and if
yeah,
I mean, yeah,
and the agreement actually does not have a 20-year term.
okay,
It has its term, it lasts as long as the members agree it should last, or as long as there are any bonds outstanding.
okay.
Right.
So I mean, I think it feels like we should tie it to something. I don't know. I don't know if that's and maybe when we talk about the ballot language, we'll have a sunset. I don't, but whatever. I mean, I think we're okay. It's always nice to have some like, let's check in just in case. But 20 years is, we're in negotiating with the city right now, and that's about what we're looking at for that negotiation too,
Hmm.
as a, kind of a check in for the term. Um, because so much can change.
Mm-hmm.
That 20 years, in 20 years. So it feels like not necessarily that it would end, but that it would have some kind of um, reevaluation.
Right.
Sarah, did you have any, we touched lightly on the form of the, I guess, the form of the commitment.
Yes. And
Is that,
if you sent me something, I totally apologize. Did you send me something?
I have not sent
Okay,
anything.
good.
And really what I was wondering is whether or not that was something that you wanted to send for our consideration, or something that you'd like us to send a form. I think we talked about a pledge agreement that would take effect upon formation of the authority.
Yes, I think we did. If you have an example, then I can send it to our legal to review and draft from there. Um,
Okay.
we are working right now on our agreement with the city, and we are that we put in the draft terms right now. We have our commitment to RTA documented there as well. So, but yes, I think it should be appropriate. It feels appropriate to have it specifically documented for the RTA.
Yes, I'm wondering, however, if we want to just incorporate the separate document that's a little bit ahead by reference. Um, so maybe that's something that I don't know, Dan, if Dan is involved, maybe Dan, you and I and Kirsten can talk about.
Okay, and it's not yet. We're drafting the term to send to city council
Okay.
for review on the 1st of July. So,
Okay.
um, but we just wanted to make sure it was included in there, so it was thought of as the entire package. But I look to you guys, and I can ask our legal too on how we want to do that. What's the best way?
Yeah, like I think as we've discussed before, we can document it in a number of different ways. We can incorporate an existing agreement, we can have a separate pledge. But I would agree it probably needs to be integrated with whatever you're doing with the city. But defer to Dan on that point.
Yep.
Yeah, we don't know quite what that looks like yet, but I can, work with everyone as the situation develops.
Okay.
Great. All right. Well, who is 4260 cell phone number?
That's me, Sonia. Can you hear me?
Oh, hey Sonia, sorry. Yes, we can. I'm just going to rename you in in our Zoom. So, I this meeting, I'm going to put the agenda up on the screen real quick. This was really meant as a check-in meeting. If we needed to check in on anything on our communications, our handout. So this could be a very short meeting if we want it to be. The first agenda item was messaging and community outreach discussion. We have, I believe, our flyer is now approved and moving forward. Randy, you were able to get what you need?
Yep, I was able to get what I need, and it's being printed right now, and I will get it to where I need it by noon today. So we're good.
Wonderful. That's great news. Thank you everyone for your help, collaboration, edits, feedback on that. I think it's going to be, I hope, a helpful collateral piece to share with community members. We are working with the design team at Fair and Peers to turn that into a mailer that's going to be sent out in July to community members across the proposed RTA area. And what we're going to do is incorporate that handout, but also incorporate some more specifics per community of where the RTA could make improvements in the future. So look for an example of that here in the very near future, because we're working on those right now. So those will be the mechanism that we can have folks take a short survey based on their community and their community's needs. I'm going to bring up a real rough draft of what this will look like, but please note we're still working on the look, the flow, the readability of this, but I hope by early next week we have samples or a mock-up coming out to everyone to review and give us their feedback on this. But envision what you're seeing on your screen is like a old, kind of a newsletter size piece that is folded twice so that it mails as a 8.5 by 5.5 piece. And so we're utilizing the handout here for that. And then this is an example that we're starting to work on for the City of Craig folks, but it would then detail some of the possible future offerings that could be beneficial to people in Craig. So, like I said, design, readability, all those pieces we're still working on, but this is the general concept. So, love to get your initial thoughts and reactions, though I know that we will need to send this out via email so folks can really take a look at it. Keep moving forward.
Yeah, I would. This looks good to me. As far as mailing, where are you getting the list of who and what you're mailing it to? Just registered voters, or
Yeah. So most efficient way for us to mail, and the way we typically do it for any of these, from RAFTA to Eagle Valley, is we do pull the database from the voter database. It's the most updated. Um, I have I have access to it, and then we household it so that we send only one piece per household. So anytime there's two or more voters in a household, we just send it to the household. If there's only one voter in the household, then we send it to that voter.
Okay. My other
And
question is, where or how are you going to get them to connect with the survey? I know you have the thing on the bottom, but is there any other way to emphasize to please do this or make comments or thing? Because that's a tiny, I understand we want to say all
yeah,
the other things, but that QR code and that little thing on the
this
bottom is really small.
nope, this space here, Randy, underneath the mailing panel
Perfect.
is going to be all about feedback, answering this, and it's
Great.
going to be big. I just have placeholder text in there now because I've got to write it and
Perfect.
get it designed. But that's going to be like big, real big there. That's what that space is being saved
Good.
for.
That's, yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
Because that was one of the things with the mailer, with not the mailer, with the
handout.
flyer
Yeah,
is
sure.
the handout is that, yeah, and I understand because we needed everything else, but
Yeah.
without us physically pointing out here, please take this survey, people aren't going to see it or do it. But
Yep.
with this, that yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's going to be what, a quarter of this entire piece will be dedicated to feedback. So new iteration will come out to everyone. We'll make these design changes. We'll incorporate the feedback and all those kind of things into this. And we'll have that out to everyone early next week for feedback. Our goal is to have this hitting people just, in early July, but just after the July 4th, right? And Sonia, jump in. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. I'm just messing around here. I'm in my car, so hopefully I don't lose you. But I was just wanting to ask you if we were going to talk a little bit about kind of the communications process in developing materials and, what that looks like as we go into
Sure.
more of a kind of voter facing phase. Is that something to address now, or is
Please.
that on the agenda?
I mean, I think that's part of this whole conversation. If you want to take the lead in having that conversation, please, I'd say take it away.
Okay, well, I just was wanting to I looked at you guys it's hard to believe that it was a year ago that we signed this MOU about how we were going to operate and what we were going to do and all that stuff. Let's see if I can see you. Can you see me? Oh, hi. There you go. Um so basically, we had an operating agreement through our MOU that we signed like last year, and I think it's still pretty good and pretty valid. But I'm wondering if we need to re-up that as we walk into this phase of developing publications, just to include procedurally, how do we deal with these communications pieces? Because, based on my experience with campaigns, I mean, really what we're trying to accomplish is establish what's the key message. That's sort of step one, right? Like, what are we talking about to voters, which is often very different than what we're talking about internally at our meetings where we're all geeking out over IGAs and all the acronyms. Like, we have to be a little different when we're talking to our voters. So, like, establishing that clear message and then thinking about what is the right medium for that information to go out. And I think the third piece that's really important is who's the messenger. I think that local governments are good at implementation, but I'm not sure that we're always the right messenger. And so, for example, in the case of Steamboat Springs, like, I'm hoping that we can recruit some local business owners and other folks. Everybody probably knows the Deemers from Johnny B's. They're really fired up about this project and, thinking about potentially, okay, I don't know if you guys, okay. Just thinking about, but like, how do we agree upon the defined message, the tools we're going to use, and who's going to be talking about it, what, where, and when? This is a committee that's a consensus-based committee based on our MOU. And, so that means essentially that we're going to be wanting to have conversations before we're going out and doing things on behalf of this quote unquote campaign. So I guess, I'm a little bit, I don't say uncomfortable, but just like I feel like we haven't defined that stepwise process in a clear way and all agreed to it. So I don't know if others feel the same way about wanting to kind of bring some internal agreements to the way that we're representing this situation, or if I'm just sort of have my own campaign philosophy of how we do this.
I don't know, Sonia. I think as long as we agree with the basic pieces, how each community gets that out is up to the community. Because how Steamboat's going to do it is going to be probably totally different than how Craig's going to do it. So I think it's going to be hard as far as the getting the message out process to have an agreement among everybody that we're all going to do it this way. Is that what you're trying to say, or?
Not exactly. What I'm trying to say, sorry, it's just, for example, like just like we did in the IGA, we basically said there are certain things we'll consider for funding mechanisms and other things we really don't want to talk about because we know they're just going to inflame people and, cause problems. So I guess, similarly, I mean, I feel like as we're talking about this RTA, what really is relevant to people today is November 2025 on the ballot for formation. I've unfortunately heard way more conversation around tax than I want to in our local community. And I mean, part of this obviously is because the city is going for their lift tax, they're going for the vacancy tax. But like, I just would hope we could find some clear agreement about how we discuss the funding mechanism. And Bill and I had discussed maybe we have like a little bit of an elevator speech about what you do say and what you absolutely don't say, because I think it could be extremely counterproductive for us. I know it could be extremely counterproductive to be talking about 2026 and a tax because we haven't agreed to that for one. And when my commissioners heard that for the first time in a meeting, they were not happy that that was being presented to the public. So, if we can agree that we're not talking about a tax in 2026 necessarily, but that we actually, yes, included within the IGA all of the statutorily available forms of funding except property tax. Like, I feel like that's the message when you talk about funding is, hey, we've got good investment from the ski corps. Sarah and I met yesterday or 2 days ago, whenever, sometime with the state. We're talking about, can we get some commitments there? The city of Steamboat Springs could allocate some short-term rental funding to this. And Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. And then, of course, we're also talking about putting this into the Excel package. So I guess my question is like, wouldn't it be great if we could get to the place where we're talking to the voters and we're basically all singing the same tune about formation is what we need to focus on now? Here are the service things, be very honest about it. But these are all of the mechanisms that we're looking at for funding, and we haven't made any decisions. I think it's way premature to be talking about 2026, and particularly in the municipalities where, 4 seats out of 7 are changing hands. So, I feel pretty strongly that we shouldn't be shooting ourselves in the foot by talking about things that this group is not necessarily going to decide on, including a property tax. And that's kind of where I'm at with it, is just like my goal, Randy, for your information, is to try to get some of these like nebulous commitments, funding commitments locked in so we could actually insert them into our materials, if they become actual firm commitments like the ski corps commitments. Because I mean, I'm thinking if I'm a voter, I want to hear that formation and somebody else's money is going to get me something. And then the next step will be taken once the organization is formed. So I don't want to hear that I'm going to eventually be taxed because that hasn't been agreed to.
Thank you, Sonia, for bringing that up. But I got to tell you, you were the one that drove dividing this up and going to taxing in 2026. So if you're sitting here telling us now that that wasn't agreed upon, that's the direction that you pushed us toward going forward. So if you want to change that messaging, that's fine. And I appreciate you doing that. But in this meeting with the formation, we have talked at length about forming it in 2025 and a funding in 2026.
Yeah, and I thought at the last meeting that we also said that we weren't going to talk about tax into the future because we didn't have the right people to make those decisions. And I specifically remember making a commitment to go back to my commissioners per the request of Mayor Banks and Hayden and talk about, like, did we want to consider and put back on the table a funding mechanism in 2025? So where I thought we left the last meeting was formation in 2025 was recommended by this group. And, you need to go back to your jurisdictions and talk about whether that's good with you. And then does anybody want to kind of go back to the idea of funding in 2025?
Well, part of the requirement was that Kaplan and Kearse needed an answer, Sonia. Polly, do you recall that?
Yeah, and for our purposes and the IGA, it doesn't really matter. It was more for the messaging. But I also recall that what we were going back on was the property tax issue, not necessarily the timing issue. So would welcome anybody else's recollection. I do not have those notes in front of me. Bill, you may have them at your fingertips.
I agree with the last meeting. I mean, other meetings, yes, we pushed with taxing this first, but the last meeting it was a long discussion on whether we include the property tax or not. And let's just leave it open for now and go back to our communities, talk to them, because that's what I did, and find out what are your thoughts on the property tax part of it, because we don't have to really sign that in until August. But the previous meetings, yeah, there was a definite push for the 2026 doing the financing with the formation now. But the last meeting, my recollection is most of it was on the property tax part of it.
Yeah, let me jump back in on that because, I'm not suggesting that we didn't have a conversation around formation in 2025. And then if we're doing a tax, we do it in 2026. But I think the sequencing that is a little off for my team is, to be honest with you, we as a formation committee recommended that the 2025 ballot measure be done, but we're each going to have to go back to our jurisdictions and get that signed off on by our teams, right? So that's one step. And similarly, I would think that if we were going to make the recommendation of funding in 2026, or a tax in 2026, which I don't think we agreed as a group formation committee that we are now recommending to our jurisdictions that they approve a tax for 2026. And I think that's where the kind of difference of opinion maybe is that I don't recall this group voting. I mean, we're consensus based, so we don't really vote. But I don't recall any direction that said, go talk to your jurisdictions about a tax in 2026. I remember my sort of insistence that that is not a relevant discussion, given the fact that what we need to focus on is the ballot in 2025 for formation and the funding that we have from outside sources that we can highlight. So, I mean, I think we need to get some agreement around what we are actually talking about with our people as a funding mechanism. I mean, I have heard on a number of different occasions how harmful it has been to have that conversation in the community right now. The tax issue.
And Sonia, I agree with you. The way I've been presenting it and talking about Craig, including at our last council meeting, and I'll do it at our next one, is that we're concentrating strictly on formation and trying to get this out there and get it set up. And then in the future, could be 26, it could be 28, who knows? We're going to talk about how we're going to pay for it. I have not assigned a year to it, at least in my conversations with anybody. I have said that, yeah, at some point in time, we're going to have to figure out how to pay for it. But I haven't said that my push has basically been, let's get this up and going. And that's what I've been talking about.
Just a quick remark. Once the formation, once the RTA is formed, of course, the RTA will be the entity that moves forward with pursuing tax. So it'll be a little bit different dynamic.
It'll be a separate authority.
Yeah.
It'll be a separate authority, which is the other reason why I really wanted to push for formation, because I don't know, but as a formation and as that, with a 50+1, Craig can still vote no, and it can pass, which is what I want.
Well, Randy, I actually like the way you're talking about this, about, let's form, let's get the entity going. I would prefer that we not say figure out how to fund it, because it feels like then we're just throwing darts at a board. And that's kind of why I would like it if we could agree upon some messaging, because, my comfort level would be a little bit more about referring back to the IGA and saying, well, you know, the RTA itself is going to have to decide amongst the choices that are listed in the IGA, which are X, Y, and Z. I mean, I feel like that's just like, it feels like we have a plan without having a defined, this is the plan. Like,
Right.
but you know, we have this document, it's our guiding document. That's what we're going to use to make that decision, but at the appropriate time. Because the truth of it is, if the RTA is going to make that decision, I mean, it's largely irrelevant what we're saying if we're not the representatives on the board, and and that decision is not made. So then we even look more off message if we're talking about it now, and then everybody gets replaced and those guys decide they're going to put a vehicle license fee as the future of it, right? I mean, so I just think there are a lot of reasons that we should be actively avoiding the discussion of any one particular funding mechanism, and I think it harms us a lot.
Well, how to go, Bill, with Eagle Valley and Polly? What is your experience of this messaging? Are we shooting ourselves in the foot by not bringing it up, or is it
Well, I think this is unique because every other RTA that I've worked with or I've monitored, like the San Miguel one, Smart, all went for funding as part of their formation. RAFTA evolved, right? RAFTA was evolutionary in their funding, but EVTA, SMART, Gunnison Valley all did funding as part of their original ballot question. Colorado, Pikes Peak RTA, all of those had funding. We are kind of, and Polly, Kirsten, and I can go look and see if there's any RTAs that formed first, funded later. I can't think of any. So we are cutting a little bit of new cloth here. And so we have to work collaboratively to make the message work for your constituencies and for, and make it work so that we have a single voice. We look aligned, right? That's so important with voters that we are aligned and we have a consistent message and a message that works. I like this idea of, we're going to form and the RTA board, they are going to make decisions on this based on what is allowed in the IGA. We are creating the IGA. We're going to ask voters to form the district, but it'll be the RTA board, which will be elected officials that will then, work toward how to fund the service goals. Something like that, kind of might work well in the messaging.
okay? And again, I'm fine as long as we work as a group and as a team, and we keep that messaging the same. And the one thing that I worry about doing this separately is you end up having, everyone's going to have expectations of what they're going to get with no funding. And I don't think that, we're going to get a whole lot with Ski Corps' $1 million the first year. So if we change some of the messaging, I'd be curious to see what other RTAs have done, if they've even done it this way.
So one other piece that
Thoughts
I
from
feel is
people?
important. Oh, did I cut you off, Michael? You're kind of cutting in and out.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So one other thing that's I feel is hugely important about the message is, like, you can trust us, right? Like, the reason that we created our IGA in such a way that everybody had one vote, one voice, was because we wanted to make sure, especially in smaller communities, that they understand that their elected officials have a seat at the table just as equally as anybody who has large geography, large population, etc. So, if we're asking kind of like, okay, we're going to form, we're going to make this group, we're going to put a lot of trust into their hands about, how are the future funding decisions going to be made? I think the corresponding next step is, why would you want to trust this group? Well, because it is made up of your community and you get one voice and one vote and one seat at the table by virtue of having those representatives. And also, and all due respect, Sarah, because you're my good friend, but part of the messaging might be, and I don't think in written pieces, but conversationally, that while Ski Corps is investing in this, they're not driving it because they don't have a seat at the table. I mean, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful or throw you under the bus way, but like, when I talk to people about ski corps, it's like, it's all money in, and it is like letting us as local governments do the work that we have been elected to do. And so I think those are important pieces of the message here that, would, because as important as what you want to say is what you don't want people to say. And what we don't want people to say is, this is Steamboat Springs and Ski Corps just doing their thing, and everybody else is going to be kind of running along after it.
Yes, I'm not offended. I totally get it.
And I agree with you.
And I'll just say,
Yeah,
as
and-
for a smaller community, that's already being said. It's Steamboat Springs is running this, not so much Ski Corp. We're not hearing that. But the other thing that we also need to remember, especially from Yampa's perspective, is we have much older people here. So that's one of the things that when this has been tried before, and I think I've talked about this with Bill, and it's been tried before, they're automatically going, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So we have that over here that we're fighting as far as, hey, give us a chance, listen to what we're saying. They don't care what we're saying. They don't want to hear it because they've already heard it before and it didn't work. And the other part of that is, like, I have 2 people on the board that are not up for reelection next year. And if we're going to be elected officials, how are they going to trust the next group coming in when they haven't been a part of it from the beginning?
So what strategy would you suggest? And we don't have to go into the weeds too much in this call because I know we have a full agenda. But Stacy, I totally appreciate your comments. And how do we get this to where it's not Steamboat driving it, but it's you guys driving it? And Oak Creek and Hayden and Craig. How do we relinquish some of that misunderstanding so that they see it's 6 people making 6 votes?
I think honestly, I like Randy's idea. I think by giving them that information, starting the formation, and then coming back in with the everything else, I think is going to make a huge difference rather than saying, here's what we're doing, period. You don't have a say. We're giving it to these 6 people to make that decision for you, but here's why we're doing what we did. And I don't know that that's ever been really clear in any of our meetings that we've had. I don't think that we've ever sat and just said that, hey, it's 1 vote per unit, however you want to put it. It's your elected officials that's going to be part of the formation. It's not going to be Joe Blow down the street that's making the decision for the whole town. And I think that, in order to make people, especially here, more comfortable, you need to look at your elected officials and say, okay, well, who, yeah, we need an elected official. But the problem's going to be when you start changing your officials all the time, which we all know happens. What do we do? How do you continue that trust? And I think that's going to be our biggest issue, especially in Yampa. It's continuing that trust.
So there's some wisdom in what Sonia's saying as to having the formation done, and then we seat a new authority board, and then that authority board will then determine how to get the funding mechanism throughout the year 2026 after we formed it, and they can start working a strategy for the whole community. And we should just tone down the rhetoric on how we're going to fund it until that group gets set.
Yeah, I agree, Michael. And I haven't, my whole push is not to talk about the funding because all that does is kill the conversation before it even starts. And I don't think you're going to ever end, well, we're doing this for Steamboat. All we're doing is helping Steamboat from any of the smaller communities, whether it's Yampa, Craig, Hayden, Oak Creek. That's just going to be the talk. What you do is what you guys said, is it's a 6-person board of which we get 1 vote, Steamboat gets 1 vote. That's how you did, and that's what they're going to move forward, is you push on that you want to be part of this so you have a vote and a say in what's going to go on.
Okay. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I got my hand up. I 100% agree with what you guys are saying, about the 1 voice, 1 vote being a really important part of the message. But I think the other piece that is really important is the messenger. And, I think we need to be thinking about who are the people that our community trusts the most. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think it's us elected officials. I know it's not ski corps. I mean, so like, should we be out there beating the bushes to think about popular people who will get behind this and like essentially help with the campaign element? And should they be the ones talking about this now and not us? I mean, I'm not saying we don't talk about it. Of course, we're going to get invited to present all of that stuff. But I would love to get some, people. I mean, and I mentioned the Deemers again, just because, they're friends of mine. They've been tracking this. They're really enthusiastic about it and everybody loves them. And they have a diner where they could just give out stuff. But so are there people like that in the communities that we need to start to be bringing in, because we're kind of in a different phase now than we were. Like IGA, we decided we're working together as governments, but now we're in the like, how do we make sure people have trust and confidence in that? And in order for us, I mean, what I've experienced in my almost 20 years is you get the voters because somebody trusts somebody else who told them that this was a good idea. I mean, we all sort of pretend that the voters sit down with like this really thoughtful, thorough, critical thinking as they go through every single project. And I don't think that's true. I think that they, I mean, I know that's not true. They call somebody up and they go, hey, Sarah, have you heard about this thing they're trying to do? And I mean, oh, by the way, let me just say one more thing about that. I just got a poll from CMC that indicates to me that CMC is going to be trying to debruce on this ballot. Now, if anybody outside of this call knows what debrucing means, that's going to throw people into a tizzy. So there's already going to be confusion. So if we can get people who are loved and trusted, and I mean, I'm sitting in front of the granary right now, those folks, then Hayden, I mean, get them start to talk about this. And so like now we shift the responsibilities away from us and towards the actual community, because like, are we going to run the campaign, or do we want like somebody like Skylar McKinley has been on our calls with us. He's been running campaigns since he was a child. I mean, literally. And he has offered to, put some sidebars around this, give us some help. Like, who do we need to bring in? How do we do this? So I'm not sure that we've really talked about that. Like, how do we get to that place?
So I'm going to jump in real quick and just say that I am trying to book, and it's evolving, and I'm turning a lot of my attention to it. I want to book 2 to 3 meetings for like high level folks in the community to come learn about the RTA formation, where we're going, where this is heading. And I want to do one in Craig. I want to do a couple in the Steamboat area, maybe one in South Route. And that would be not like town hall meetings, because people don't come to town hall meetings especially on RTA formations. But for us to be able to invite those folks that Sonia's talking about. And we have to keep that kind of fact-based and formation-based, but then there could be plenty of sidebars or after conversations about, now we have to take this into a campaign, nudge, nudge. So I'm trying to start to find dates in July and August to do that. And that might be the place where everyone here on this call invites some of those key stakeholders to those kind of briefings.
There's some wisdom in that. Thank you.
Sarah,
Well,
I saw your hand up.
yeah, I mean, I guess as a non-elected official, see, this is the value I can bring to the table. I mean, shouldn't we be actually forming a campaign and have a committee and a five? Yeah, okay. And I know. So maybe maybe we create a list of people who we think would be good, and we can reach out to them, and then we do that work. And I say we, but maybe it's, yeah, we can talk to a couple different
Yeah.
folks who can do that.
Yeah,
Because we do need a formal campaign.
yeah.
Even
So
even for formation, we need a campaign.
right. So for Eagle Valley Transportation Authority, that phase was adopted and taken on by Chris Romer at the Vail Valley Park.
Okay, great. And so maybe we have some conversation with the chamber, and see who else. And Craig Chamber, maybe Jennifer Holloway, Sarah Leonard. We start there. We see based on kind of, Sonia, you mentioned a couple different people, Tammy, the Delaney's. So
Oh,
maybe we set up a meeting like that and we get started.
And every community has those individuals.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like, and I'm thinking for Routt County, I mean, we need to have, some folks who are a little more rural, who are a little more out there. I mean, one of the things that really has been interesting is we just haven't focused that much on North Route, and so, like, if you're living in Clark, somebody who lives near you is going to need to be liking this program, or else you're just going to be
Mhm.
like, what's in it for me? And I'm not saying there's never going to be anything in it for North Route, but we haven't come up with anything yet. And I think similar to Stacy's comments, like, one of the pieces I would also like to include in our messaging, but I don't know if we're doing this, but I think it would be wise for us, especially in the smaller communities, to build into this programming like a working group. Like Stacy was saying, like, it's not worked before. Why is it going to
Yes.
work now? Well, it's because we want you to come tell us, like, what do you need? When do you travel? What do you do when you travel? Are you carrying a bunch of crap? Are you in a position where you can ride a bus or, train, or what, like, asking all those kinds of questions to start to have local people telling
So,
us what they want.
so when you form, that could be because there won't be right away with what we know a lot of money to turn on services, right? But then you could do that kind of stakeholdering transportation planning. And right there, that becomes then the seeds and the roots for public trust and potentially successful funding measures in the future. And that would be a pretty valuable value add of the RTA once it's established, is to do that kind of stakeholdering transportation planning.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bill. I mean, I think too, like, that's part of our messaging though, is that, there is this, there will, so I guess what I do, not to, I'm not going to charge you guys for campaign information, just kidding. But, like, when I do messages, I mean, there's the positive, and then what are the negatives that we're looking to counter, right? And one negative we're looking to counter is it's not going to work because it hasn't worked before. And another one is, like, what's in it for me? I don't know. And so the second one is, you're going to know because we're going to ask you to be the one after this is formed. And I mean, part of the reason I say if we're going to do this is because we're not going to sit in this room and make that commitment if it's not how we intend to roll the thing out. But in my mind, what Bill's saying makes a lot of sense. I mean, I almost feel like voters would like to see that happen before the election, but I don't think that's really probably within our capacity or the programming right now. But I think we need to be clear, if we decide that that's the direction we're going, are we confident enough that we can put that out there as a promise, campaign promise type of thing? Because, again, recognizing that, I mean, for my group, my board's not changing. So the likelihood that I'm going to be not here is sort of small. But I mean, we got city council, Michael, you got 4 seats moving, and I don't know about the other municipalities. So I guess my very long-winded question is, do we agree that it is advisable to make the commitment to our communities that, like, immediately upon formation, and probably like not November 6th or whatever the day is, but that immediately upon formation, that stakeholdering will be done to make sure that the services that we're wanting to put together are the best services for the communities.
Anybody's thoughts?
Well, one of the issues I have, and I understand and I agree with where you're talking and wanting to go and get the people to push it because they'll vote for it. The thing that we need to figure out, and one of the pushes that I want to do in Craig, is that the people who are going to push it in positive aren't going to use it. I'm not going to use it. Most of the businesses in Craig aren't going to use it. Who's going to use it are the seniors and the lower echelon who don't have service in Craig right now, and the workers who are trying to get over there. That's who we're trying to get at. I mean, and yes, it's the stakeholders and other who will do that message, but they're not going to use it.
But don't you
Well,
think, oh, sorry, Sonia.
I think go.
Well, I was going to say, Randy, I think that's part of the value of those of us, like, I know that we have 100 people who work at the resort who work in Craig, right? So part of that is the messaging from the different businesses to help with that. Like, this is going to really help and make your life easier. And, some of those messaging. So, I think the messaging can come both ways to Craig.
Yep.
And then also from the business, we'll do post and education and town halls about what the RTA is. as well as other businesses who rely. I know lots of businesses who rely on folks coming from Craig. So I think there can be different messaging coming from different entities
Different
as
area.
part
And
of
that's,
that.
yeah, that's right. Yep, I
Yep.
agree.
I think the other piece, Randy, that I would fight back with on that one, or not fight back, but like have as a comeback is, well, I know you're not going to use it, but wouldn't it be great if Sarah's 100 employees from Craig weren't on the road in their single-use cars? And wouldn't it be great if we could get, the 522 people who work at the airport to commute instead of in their single-use vehicles? So, I mean, I think that counter messaging to like, it's not for me, it is for you because it alleviates congestion for you in your car. So I think that that's a really good and important point for us to continue to stress. And one other thing I wanted to say about this too is like for rural route county, I mean, the other thing we have to all be comfortable with is like we've already agreed that we're talking about the Safe Crossings project as a part of the RTA, which is the thing at Brandon Circle and so on. And so like Route County is committed to doing that project. So when we start to go out and say who's going to, help us promote this, like the Safe Crossings Committee is going to want their project to advance. Now, I mean, we have committed to that already. We're going to make that happen with or without an RTA. But with an RTA, it would open up a lot of new opportunities. It might make things more streamlined, more quick. So like, are we comfortable with engaging them as a potential stakeholder for the campaign side of things, knowing that they have their own, 3 subdivision rich constituency and an entire school?
I just
Absolutely.
want to say real quick on what Randy said. I think he's right. It's not the stakeholders that we need being out there saying, hey, we're going to do this. As you need the workers, you need the people that are going to be riding the buses. Those are the ones that are going to say, hey, John, I ride the bus and look how, I get to work. I'm not stressed, blah, blah, blah. I think that you're going to do better if you're not with the big companies. Yes, they're going to get the word out. But if your workers, the people that are actually going to use the RTA are the ones that are getting the information out, your people, normal, regular, blue collar people are going to listen to them more than they're going to listen to stakeholders and to people that have money and that aren't going to be using the RTA. That's something that we need to really think about too when we're creating these committees that use the people that are going to be using the RTA.
Good point. Really good point. And I like that. I think that's the message. And so here's the question. Let's kind of see it. I don't want to, you guys are all having fantastic ideas. Is this something that we want to do before November, or when we talk about the formation ballot language that we, plant some seeds for the same group that's going to help us get formation over the line to help us with what do we do next year with, messaging of the RTA with the new formation in there? Do we wait until that in November until we see this thing formed? Or do we, to me, I think it would be wiser to wait a little bit and just get this formed. What do you guys think?
I think we need a campaign to get it formed. And then we
Right.
need
Yeah,
but we use the same people. No, we do that, but we use the same people next year to figure out what to do as far as funding.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree, because I think you need to get it across to get it formed. And for example, one of the things that I pushed and will continue to push on, seniors dominate Craig and will vote down anything that happens. If you get the seniors on your side, at least in Craig, you'll get it through, and they will help you do it, whether it's with formation or then with how they're going to pay for it.
yeah, and Randy, I mean, I think you make a good point, and so does Stacy. And I kind of want to build on what Stacy was saying is just that, like, in a typical campaign, you would have these sort of spokespeople groups. So let's just go to the airport, right? The airport, the Route County side of things, like the staff is evenly split between, actually it's majority Craig now, but it used to be kind of even between Route and Moffett counties. So like, can we get a couple of people who work out there to say, we really need this and this is why, like from both of the directions, for example? I mean, those are actual like working people who will use it, who are using it. Can we ask people on the Craig bus that is already oversubscribed? Like, for example, I have an employee around county who I had lunch with this week, and she was telling me that she wouldn't take the Craig bus because, you know, she sometimes gets off work a little later than it goes, and if she misses it, she's just screwed, right? So like somebody like that might be willing to come forward and say, you know, like, I think that this is really important because if we can add additional opportunities for me, it would give me the flexibility to ride the bus or not, and I wouldn't be forced into driving. You know, those are the kinds of stories that are compelling. And so, you know, I'm still less worried about like next year and future. I'm focused on formation and now. And like the only thing I'm worried about for future is like making sure that people know we're going to loop them into exactly what kind of service they're looking at.
Great idea. Love it. Any other thoughts?
Michael, thanks. I guess to me it's still a little nebulous about like who's forming the campaign committee. Bill, I don't even know. Is that like in your scope of work for you guys to? Okay,
No,
that is not within your scope. So
it
like we
can't
need to
be.
decide as this group, like, can we volunteer Skylar to coordinate the
Yeah.
committee because he's not an elected, he does campaigns, like, I mean, or do we want to do something different? We don't have to decide that today, but I think
Right.
it's really important to start getting our heads around that and getting somebody plugged in who, you know, does campaign work and can really kind of mentor us as to the best
Yeah.
ways to do this.
So to answer your question, we cannot do that as part of this scope because that would be using taxpayer dollars to do political work, and that would be illegal. Um, and so neither myself nor Kaplan Kirsch can do that as part of this scope. I do campaigns. That's typically the model is after I help the public policy phase for an RTA. So when Vail Valley Partnership took over the EVTA campaign, I still did all the collateral, the advertising materials. I made the campaign brand, the logo, the yard signs. I did all that, but then I worked for the campaign committee and they hired me separately. So we can go that model. I do agree. I think it's better to have someone local at least be the face of the campaign and the point because it speaks volumes to folks in the community. Skylar sounds awesome. I think the world of Skylar. I've worked with him on successful projects over the years. So, but absolutely, I can help with that, but it has to be a separate agreement. It can't be, and we'd have to put up a firewall. When we talk campaign, we got to do it on a different time. We should not. I think it's okay now to talk about how a campaign's going to come together, but on a call like this in the future, we should not have campaign conversations because remember, this is public time and we do put these videos online for the public to watch.
Thank you. Good point. All right. Where do you guys want to go with the agenda? Do we want to keep talking on this? Where are we going to land? Just so we have some closure.
Well, the
What have
only
we decided
question I
upon?
have, and the only question I have, and it's campaign, but it's not really campaign, it's information, is I agree with Sonia. It'd be nice to have an elevator speech that maybe we can change a little, but it's pretty much the same what we're telling everybody as far as what it will get for them with formation.
Yes, I will draft that and work on that. That's kind of my responsibility area, but I will get that elevator pitch drafted so that we can work on it collaboratively as a committee.
And
But I'll
then
take the
just to
first shot.
and then to understand process. So Bill, when you get that to us in a quickly, not, you know, so that we can all have time to review it. And then as Sonia said with the flyer that we just did, that we won't go public with it until this group all agrees that that's the correct messaging as a unified front. Is that a
Yeah, I
proper
think that's
process?
right. I think that's right, Michael. And I think, Bill, if you could also include like from an always say this, never say this format, because, you know, I mean, whether it's elevator speech or bullet points, however that's presented, but like, I would just love to make sure that we are like always say one vote, one jurisdiction, you know, like never
Mhm.
say like we're going to tax you later. And things like that. That would be really helpful. And I'm happy to help
FAQs,
you. Yeah.
FAQs like that. Like, how do we ensure that Steamboat and the resort aren't going to blah 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 blah?
Yeah.
What are the answers to those questions we know you're already getting?
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds
All
good.
right. Is there any more thoughts on messaging, policy, process? Any more thoughts going in this? We have time to talk about this. So if we're okay with the direction, we can go on to the next agenda item. But if anybody has continued thoughts on this, let's dig a little deeper. That's why we're here. All right. All right, Bill, what would you like to go over next?
We really don't have that much more on the agenda because this was going to be the major topic today. IGA issues, Polly, I'll speak for you. I don't think you have anything to update on the IGA. That's what our July 9th meeting, which is already on the books, is going to
Yeah.
be about. We're still waiting to hear back from CDOT. I think we're going to give them till the end of the month, and then we're going to start becoming a squeaky wheel with them. Does that sound correct, Polly?
Yes, that's right. They have a little bit more time and
All right.
this week soon, but we're not really anticipating much.
Yeah. All of our neighboring jurisdictions have officially signed off. So that's done. And that box, which is required, is checked off. I will send a revised version of the schedule for IGA approval and ballot language adoption because I had a quick call this morning with Yampa and Oak Creek and was informed because they're statutory towns that they do not require two readings, so that they're going to do it in one reading. So I'm going to send a revision of the schedule that shows one dates each for those two jurisdictions. And I'm not sure if that's the case for our other municipalities. If that's also the case there and you're on this call, please let me know.
Bill, I think that we are not required to refer by ordinance, but that has been our practice, and so that's why I gave you the two dates. I mean, if we got into a situation where we're pressed for time, we could talk about having only one hearing.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
I would just wanted to make sure, Bill, do we need to touch on the communications with the county clerk about elections? It seemed like there was some confusion about what needs to be done right now and materials, or is that now all resolved?
I think that's all resolved. I think the clerk we're all aligned and she knows what she needs and will inform us if she needs more information. So the Routt County clerk seems to be in a pretty good place right now to
Okay.
be prepared
Great.
for this election. We just have to remember to get those letters in by July 25 with the intent to participate in the election. She does want those letters.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And that will be something we can send a draft of around, correct, Polly?
Yes, we can send a draft, and I'm assuming will everybody need that?
I
Just
think it'd just
simply-
be good. We could have it in the July 9th packet for all our members here.
Perfect.
Okay. That's it, Michael. That's all I've got. Unless there's other items. But we already have two dates on the schedule, so we don't have to do a doodle poll mania today.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate that we put this together and that you guys were here and, wanted to make sure we address some of the operation agreements between us 6 jurisdictions and Ski Corps. And just as we need to keep communication high, we are a unified front. We want to make sure that we all understand where we are, that we're not doing our own separate things. And I'm speaking on behalf of myself on the city of Steamboat Springs. I do not want to drive this thing. I want this to be a unified front. So whatever that needs to happen, I'm willing to, push this. If it means chairing it, if somebody else from Hayden or Stacy would it messaging be better if it was chaired by one of our smaller municipalities? I'm willing to let that go as well, because we want to make sure that everyone recognizes that this is 6 municipalities and Ski Corps working on an RTA for our community. And I don't want to, I would like to make sure that Steamboat's not just the big brother that's driving this. And I apologize if that's where the messaging is, but you guys, I really need to lean on you to help guide me and guide City of Steamboat so that we can work as a community, and your community is different than ours. And so please don't hesitate to call me offline or have some suggestions of how we move forward. But we as a group want to get this RTA done. And so please, if Stacy, I totally appreciate your insight. And we want to make sure, however you feel we can do that. I can't guess. I can only speculate. And I would rather, rather hear from you guys to say, this is how we should do it. And it's during these meetings that you need to speak up, and even offline. So I appreciate everyone here now thinking about it and being part of this solution. And if there's anything that's going askew, thank you, Sonia, for bringing it up. I appreciate it. And we'll move forward. And I guess our next meeting is July 9th.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think you do a good job with chairing these meetings, and I think um that it's very generous of you to offer that if somebody wanted to be the chair, just to give their community that confidence that they're included. It's actually a really good point, but I'm not sure that that's. I mean, I'm thinking more on the messenger side of things, but I will just say, Ryan Banks from Hayden is really committed to this project also. They had their like Hayden Town Council retreat or town board retreat today, so he was not able to make it, but he's been pretty active as well. So, Stacy,
Yes.
please take that under consideration if it would help to have you be more of a featured player for Yampa, and if you wanted to, or how does that look? But I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah, this is a group effort, guys. I'm not trying to I'm excited about it. My enthusiasm is extremely high. I'm never going to apologize for that. But I also want to recognize the sensitivity of Steamboat's populace versus the other groups. So we're all in this together. Just guide us, let's do it together. All right. Without any further ado, I will let you guys enjoy the rest of your June, and we'll rendezvous on July 9th. And if anything changes or you get notice, the communication will come through him on any kind of future agendas or polls or what we need to do. Sound good?
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Appreciate you all. Meeting adjourned.